Empires rise and fall, and with every passing year, a little more of them is forgotten. If I ask you what remains of the Roman Empire, what can you show me? A few lines in a textbook, perhaps a city bearing the name of a long-gone emperor, or a crumbling ruin that is just lost in the weeds. At first glance, there's very little left for us today. Most details have just faded into obscurity. But here's something that may surprise you. Rome once had a city so powerful, it declared its independence and even crowned an emperor of its own. That city was Rome's great northern stronghold of Trier. Hi, I'm Ben. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am a very small YouTuber. As you may know, these videos are a lot of work. If you like what you see, a simple like can keep me going so I can bring you more content in the future. Now, let's dive in. Modern-day Trier, Germany, in Roman times was known as Augusta Treverorum. This was, of course, the largest city north of the Alps in the Roman Empire. Founded in the 1st century BC, it soon grew to a population in the tens of thousands. Despite sitting on the frontier with barbarian tribes, by the crisis of the 3rd century, when the Roman Empire splintered into 3 parts, Trier was able to carve up its own part of an empire. Protected by the Alps, the Gallic Empire held out for 14 years between the years 260 and 274 AD. During that time, it maintained its own army, its own affairs, and even its own currency. Despite being a breakaway state, the empire centered in Trier remained very Roman. Just look at one of these coins, for example. On the left, we have a portrait of the Roman Emperor Postumus, ruler of the Gallic Empire, which looks no different than a real Roman emperor on the right. Although Trier briefly ruled its own empire, its culture and identity were still deeply Roman. So what's left of this once great Roman city, and seat of an empire? You may expect the Romans or time had simply erased it. After all, many Roman cities in Gaul that survived into modern times don't have very much to show for it. But in Trier's case, you'd be wrong. Augusta Treverorum not only survived, it thrived, eventually becoming one of the capitals of the Roman Empire after the crisis. It even served as Emperor Constantine's seat of power, from which he would eventually convert the empire to Christianity. Trier may no longer be a regional capital. Its population of 50,000 is about what it was during Constantine's time. This of course pales in comparison to other Roman cities from the time like Cologne or Lyons. Trier remains the best preserved Roman city north of Italy. In fact, calling some of these structures ruins is just downright false. And let me show you why. The palace from which Constantine ruled still stands, and it's still in use. As the first Christian emperor, it's fitting that today the Constantine Basilica is a Lutheran church. For 17 centuries, the people of Trier have walked past and touched these exact same walls with very little change. In fact, a medieval lord who planned to demolish it for his own palace found the walls simply too sturdy to destroy. Instead, he simply built his palace around it, which is the pink building you see behind it today. While the interior was heavily damaged during World War II, the structure itself survived, as it had for centuries before. It may never be fully restored to what it was, but the basilica remains in everyday use, much like modern buildings nearby. The Roman bridge built in 17 BC is another marvel of endurance. Its original arches still support modern automobile traffic, though the bridge's deck had to be replaced after World War II. Otherwise, it remains as it was during Constantine's time, a piece of living history. Trier's most iconic structure, however, is the Porta Nigra, or Latin for Black Gate. Where most European cities have long since torn down even their medieval walls, Trier's North Gate from Roman times is still standing. The multi-story gate gets its modern name from its darkened sandstone walls. Its original Roman name is lost to history, and oddly enough, the front gate was actually never completed, but during the Middle Ages, the Porta Nigra was converted into a monastery and then a church. By 1800, it was unrecognizable from its ancient state. Now, the city, of course, would have never demolished their own church, so why was it reverted? And the credit, or I guess the blame, really goes to Napoleon Bonaparte. When he occupied the region, he ordered the church to be dismantled, but local protests saved the Roman structure beneath. The rest was unfortunately hauled away by the French army. If you were to ever visit, it is a must-see, and for only a few euros, it is a surreal experience to explore the inside and see the carvings of a civilization long gone. It makes you wonder what will be left of our world today after 17 centuries. I doubt the Romans thought that this, of all things, would stand the test of time. Regardless, it's a piece of the city's cultural heritage, and it's ironic that their German ancestors were what actually brought the empire down in the end. but it is still a curious place of the world that we still have today. There are two other ancient attractions in Trier I didn't get a chance to visit. The first is the Roman Amphitheater. Virtually all Roman cities had one, but it is nonetheless an important relic of the past. The other is St. Matthias' Abbey, where, according to the Catholic Church, the Apostle St. Matthias is buried. While not one of the original 12 disciples, he was the apostle chosen to replace Judas following Christ's crucifixion. This is, of course, a very odd final resting place from somebody from the Middle East. Supposedly his remains were gifted to Trier by the Byzantine Empire, but is still a very odd but fascinating piece of early church history. Lastly, there are the Roman baths, plural. And unfortunately, the public baths were closed on the day I visited, but enclosed in this weird giant glass cube. I just found that kind of odd. But I did explore the Kaiserthermen, a complex that was never completed as intended. Initially a gift from the emperor, it was later repurposed as a meeting hall under Constantine. While most of the above-ground structure was demolished in medieval times, the subterranean parts were repurposed as sewers. Walking through the underground tunnels today, you can almost imagine Roman citizens rounding a corner to discuss business or even the most recent barbarian raid. It's truly an immersive experience. So there's plenty to see here, but I'm going to keep it at that for today's episode. I've already covered the Kaiserthermen previously, so I don't want to be a broken record here or anything, but if you'd like to learn more, I'd highly recommend you check it out. It's easy to forget just how vast the Roman Empire was, leaving its mark on 3 entire continents and the entire Mediterranean basin. Trier is also a reminder that the empire wasn't just about emperors lounging around in Italy and eating grapes all day. It shaped the world that we live in today. Descendants of Roman law and the Latin language still touch everyday life in Europe as well as beyond. Though the empire is long gone, in Trier its buildings still stand. It is still very much a Roman city, colored by the bones of its ancient past. Best of all, people continue to live and work in them as they've been long set in stone. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you learned something new, and if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, a like or a comment below would help me immensely. Until next time, guys, see you on the next one.